Today, we have a special guest, author, journalist, and KOL Nury Vittachi, who has written a dozen books. Many know him from the new media circle, where he makes videos on multiple channels, including Friday Every Day. You can also find that FridayEveryday.com. He is a regular media commentator whose writing appears on johnmenadue.com's Pearls and Irritations. You may also follow his Twitter X handle, I do, at Nury Vittachi. That ends with an I. If you hadn't yet, you can now. Welcome to the bridge, Nury.
Hey, Jason, always good to talk to you.
Likewise. So, Hong Kong is a hot topic. You moved there in 1987. I learned that because I Googled you. Hong Kong underwent massive changes in 1997 as Hong Kong passed back into its Chinese family from the British who had colonized it. My question, and I think there are parallels to be drawn with today, is were Westerners scared away?
Right. Yes. One of the advantages of being old is that you see everything 2 or 3 times over. So what we're seeing now, panic, Westerners leaving. We, of course, saw it in the 90s, late 80s, 89, 1991, up to 97. And it's quite funny. It really annoys me, to be honest, because what happens is that you get these articles saying, all the Westerners are leaving, Hong Kong will never be the same again. But Westerners are a tiny number. They're less than 1%. Okay, they're about 0.6%. Sometimes fractionally more, sometimes fractionally less, but they're tiny. And so what they're actually saying is that, the tiny percent is slightly less. There are 10 times as many Asian expats in Hong Kong as Western expats, but we don't count. So sometimes when I see a journalist who's written one of these all the expats are fleeing stories, I go up and I point to them like this. I say, hey, how many Indians have arrived or left? How many Nepalese have arrived or left? What are the figures for Indonesians? And they don't know. Of course they don't know. And they want to reply, only white people count, but they can't reply that, of course, because that would be just racist. So they changed the subject, But so the quick answer to the other Westerners leaving question is, I don't care. I don't think Hong Kong cares. It doesn't make a big difference.
Well, you've also been pointing out on your social media, and I've seen in a lot of articles, some judges, Western judges, British judges, have stepped down from the courts in Hong Kong. What do you make of that?
I mean, this is a big controversy at the moment. So Hong Kong had a unique system where we had an international committee of judges, and some have been pressurized to leave and some have stayed. But there's been a big controversy over the last couple of days because one of them, a man named Lord Jonathan Sumption, wrote a furious article in the Financial Times yesterday, and everyone's really annoyed about it because it's very Daily Telegraph. It's sort of like it's crude and uninformed, which is pretty shocking for a senior judge who's been based there. I mean, it's just full of things that are just plain wrong. Like he says, pro-democracy media has been closed down by police action. But that's just simply not true. He's obviously referring to Apple Daily. And, the company's own files say it was closed down by its parent company. You have to tell the truth when you're talking about a listed company. The police didn't close it down. That's just ridiculous. He also talks about, people being arrested for writing children's cartoon books. Now, this children's cartoon book, in quotation marks, that's also a bugbear of mine because I actually got one and I read it out loud on the internet so people could see what it was.
Wow.
It wasn't a children's cartoon book. It was a book for adults. It was an anti-immigrants book. It's about this cute family of a cute community of sheep who are happy, and then immigrants arrive, and the immigrants smell bad. The immigrants defecate in public. The immigrants bring disease. The immigrants steal things because they have no morality. It's a furious anti-immigration document. And then the book ends with, since immigrants are so bad, the immigrants are the wolves, the locals are the sheep, isn't it right that we should all be out on industrial action, brothers and sisters? That's what it says, So clearly it's not aimed at children, it's aimed at adults. And it's so bigoted that you probably wouldn't be allowed to publish it in the UK. So Lord Sumption, the UK that you have returned to, probably wouldn't be allowed to publish this anti-immigrant tirade. To call it a children's book means you've never read it. You're just writing in the FT without having read what you're talking about. So naughty. So actually, I was sad when I read that he was leaving, but now I think, thank God he's gone. If he's going to be in the Daily Telegraph on us, then we don't want you.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I feel the same way about a lot of expats who left between 2016 and 19. And here in Beijing, a lot of people were just, rampant alcoholics and very abusive towards locals. And then a lot of laws changed where, measuring qualifications for certain jobs was increased, and then metrics were, really tightened down on, and suddenly all of the most aggressive expats were gone. It became kind of a nice haven overnight. So yeah, sometimes when some of the correct demographic leave, it's not that bad.
Right, that's it. Agree with you
um
there.
I wanted to ask you about economics though. So obviously, 1997, I think we should start there. Before 1997 and after 1997, how did the economics of Hong Kong change? After the British were basically forced to give up, or I guess they kind of reluctantly gave up their colony, did Hong Kong's economy improve?
Yes, I mean, again, this is something you won't find in print, but Hong Kong's economy, not just economy, but Hong Kong improved in hundreds of different ways. The economy went up for a start. Not only did Hong Kong people become richer than they were before, but they became richer than the average UK citizen. The average Hong Kong citizen was much wealthier and is wealthier today than the average UK citizen. But we're not crass. We're not just all about money. Hong Kong also became healthier, not just healthier than any UK citizen, but than any country in the world. Hong Kong became literally, statistically, the healthiest community in the world.
Wow.
We overtook Japan in longevity, and we had higher health rates across the different social classes. Also, just the environment improved. The harbour was clean so that people could swim in it. Before 1997, you would just die if you swam in it. It was so dirty. Now I've seen children swimming in it regularly. The sky is blue now. It used to be grey. I think you've had the same thing in Beijing. The anti-pollution programs have actually worked in Hong Kong as they have in other parts of China. So yes, Hong Kong is greatly improved. Crime has gone down, safety levels have gone up, economy's gone up, health levels have gone up. I mean, what's not to love?
Well, I'm not sure because I have different things I want out of this question. So I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to let you handle it without me preloading it, and then I'll load it later. What was Hong Kong like in 1987 when you first came?
I mean, Hong Kong was a lovely place, but it was going through a transition. Hong Kong's been through lots of transitions. So, I mean, a one-paragraph history. Until 1951, it was an entrepot, a transshipment area. That was its main industry. And then the Korean War made the laws change. So the West was angry with China because of it supporting the Koreans against the American army. So the laws changed. Hong Kong was not allowed to be an entrepreneur anymore. So we switched to being a manufacturing society. We were a manufacturing society until the 80s. And then around 87, 88, 89, we switched to being two things. One, a service industry. And second, a front office for Chinese manufacturing. So what would happen in the late 80s, early 90s? Is business people would fly in from around the world, and they would come to Hong Kong and they'd say, okay, this looks quite Western, clean, modern. China was still mysterious in those days. The Hong Kong office would say, yes, we can make widgets for you. How many would you like? And the guy says, well, this looks clean and safe. 10 million widgets, please. And they'd say, I'll just call downstairs to the factory. And he'd call downstairs to the factory, but he was really calling Shenzhen or Dongguan, or somewhere. And they say, can you make 10 million widgets by next week? Yes, okay, deal done. So that all began in the late 80s. And so that was Hong Kong's reincarnation, reinvention going on at that time.
Well, obviously you've been in Hong Kong a lot more than almost anyone I know. How would you, what have you noticed change over the decades that you've been here? How would you, describe Hong Kong today versus Hong Kong several decades ago?
Yeah, I mean, there was a problem in the old days of hostility towards the mainland, towards mainland China. And that's because we were very ill-informed. We were very brainwashed, and I definitely include myself as both a brainwash victim and a brainwasher. I mean, just to give you one example, I had a good friend who worked for the World Bank, and he was in charge of international hunger projects. So he had a great job. He went around the world distributing money. Whenever he went to the mainland, he stopped and had dinner with me in Hong Kong. This was in the early 90s. And one day, early 90s, he stopped and he said, it's amazing. China are saying that they don't want our hunger projects anymore. We're going to close some of them down. And the next time he visited, he said, it's really weird. You won't believe this, but it looks like they've found some sort of solution to poverty. And we were both sort of stunned at this. And basically, I told him, I don't believe a word of it. It's rubbish. And he said, no, it's happening. And then the next time he came, he said, this is my last visit. We're closing down all the hunger projects in China. And I could have kicked myself because a few years later, by the mid to late 90s, everyone was saying, China's done this amazing miracle with poverty. They've shrunk poverty from hundreds of millions of people down to the last 99 million people. So they've basically pulled, at that time, it was 500 to 600 million people out of poverty. And I was thinking, I had that story 5 years ago, and I didn't believe it. So that just goes to show the power of brainwashing. I just couldn't believe positive news about the Chinese government. So yeah, Hong Kong was very much in that brainwashed state in the late 80s, early 90s, before the 97 handover. We were in the brainwashed state until relatively recently, I think.
Well, I mean, do you remember the first time the idea of the Greater Bay Area was proposed? How old is this idea in your memory?
Yeah, it emerged a few times over the last 20, 30 years. It first emerged as the Pearl Delta project, because it was the Pearl River and it was a delta shape. And then the Pearl River Delta project became something else. It became the Disappearing Border project and so on. And now it's Greater Bay Area. So it's gone through various names and things, but we were very skeptical about it at first. Now it's sort of like, wow. Again, it's rather shameful in that how we misjudged, Shenzhen, Dongguan particularly. Like, I remember the first time I went to Shenzhen, there was fraud, there was currency manipulation, there was robbery, there was vice, and that was just in the hotel lobby, right? it was a bad place, and I was so skeptical. I thought, oh, this place is not going anywhere. And then it overtook Hong Kong in size. It overtook Hong Kong in GDP. It overtook Hong Kong in green policies. It overtook Hong Kong in just every way. So then we were thinking, perhaps we shouldn't have been quite so stuck up about this. So now we're very happy to learn from Shenzhen, learn from Dongguan.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, you mentioned they would call the factory downstairs, but really they're calling maybe Dongguan or Shenzhen. I'm here in Beijing. There's a big project called Jingjingji, and there's not a lot that people cling to think that this larger Hebei, Tianjin, Beijing project is really coming together to create this, I guess, megatropolis or something. But you live in a place where this is succeeding, and the integration is really obvious. Could you walk us through what projects or changes in mentality or law or anything have really kind of created the cohesion that is undergoing down in southern China.
Yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing to say this, but it's often the cruder appetites that cause the integration to happen. Like, for example, the desire for a bargain, the desire for new experience, cheap restaurants. I mean, from my point of view, my tailor in Hong Kong, there's a minimum of 3,000 Hong Kong dollars to get a tailor-made suit here. But my wife said that her dressmaker in Shenzhen could do me the same suit for a third of the price. So wow, temptation. I want to support Hong Kong tailors, but on the other hand, my tailor sometimes stuffs up badly. So I thought maybe I'll try the Shenzhen one. So it's those appetites, the hunt for a bargain. These days, the restaurant scene here is suffering a bit because people are going across the border for just for meals, because it's quite easy to get across the border now. That is how the integration is working. And the other thing is pop culture. We had a mainland pop singer in Hong Kong doing a series of concerts last week, and they were all sold out. And it was great. There were Taiwanese people there, there were Hong Kong people there, there were mainlanders there, all just jiving to the same music, literally. And the concerts were fabulous. So these simple things, food, music, shopping, the simple things of life, that is what's making the connection between these different regions. And one of the joys of that, and something that Lord Sumption, the judge, doesn't realize, is that Asian people generally are less political than Westerners. He's picked out the political allegations in the Western media, and he believes them. But for Hong Kong people, even young ones, it's sort of like, politics, yeah, take it or leave it. Have you seen who's just released a new album? Have you seen the new restaurant in Shenzhen? Have you seen that Sam's Club is opening up? Sam's Club is a shopping experience. It's American, but Chinese people love it. Hong Kong's never had it, but Hong Kong people are saying, we want to join Sam's Club. If it's a new shopping experience, we want in.
Yeah, it's a lot like Costco. I have a home in Wuhan, and they opened one literally like the next block over from where I bought my home. So my wife, we go there on vacation to our own home from Beijing once a year or so for about a week, and she's always, let's get a Sam's Club, membership. I'm like, but we're only here once a week. Can we wait, please? But anyways.
You're only here once a year, you mean? We're only here once a year.
Once a year we travel to our home. I live in Beijing where I work, but our retirement home, or our nest egg, is in Wuhan, where there's a Sam's Club next to our apartment. Yeah, but I wanted to ask you more about the Greater Bay Area. So I'm really trying to wrap my mind around it. So you're talking about there's culture, there's food, there's shopping experiences, like. There's also infrastructure. So, for example, if I understand correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there is a 60-kilometer superhighway bridge like thing that is connecting a lot of the cities in this Pearl River Delta area. Is that making it more convenient for trips between these various cities?
Yes, so now you can just drive to the mainland China. You can drive to Macau. You can just jump on a bus, and of course it's very inexpensive just taking a bus. So I mean, I don't know if it's impatience or what, but Chinese people are quite efficient. They get things done quite quickly. So the handover through the customs and immigration type desks is very quick. Sometimes there's long queues on holidays, but generally speaking, you can get a bus easily and go across to the mainland. So if there's a pile of good shopping, great restaurants, and things waiting for you, why not? So yeah, so infrastructure is a good thing.
Would you say there are more tourists from Hong Kong taking vacations in China's mainland because of cost or because of interest, or is there more people-to-people exchanges there?
I mean, a lot of Hong Kong people do have relatives in the mainland, so that's always been the case. But at the moment, it is driven by shopping, by the base needs, by the hunt for a bargain. You know, if you can, if you can get a whole new wardrobe for a fraction of the price of your wardrobe here, you know, why not? You know, it's bad for the it's bad for the retail trade here, but Hong Kong is quite creative. So you'll find that the retail trade here is offering new things, it's finding ways, bargains, new products. So they're reacting in a non-protectionist way. They're reacting by meeting the competition, using the competition as a way to improve, which is what should happen, isn't it?
Well, you know, that's my next question, because obviously a lot of people in Hong Kong are going to China's mainland and doing shopping, which is great, because I love to see people engaging with each other, and, just meeting how real other human beings are oftentimes takes away all of the weird things that go on in media. But in terms of Hong Kong's economy now that they're getting these incredible bargains in China's mainland, and they're traveling for vacation there for more affordable options, how is Hong Kong's economy doing? Are there other ways in which Hong Kong's economy is resilient and still able to grow?
Yeah, I mean, the economy is down a bit, but we can survive that. You know, for years and years, people have been saying, "Oh no, the property is too high," and now they're saying, "Oh no, the property is going down." But you can't have both, right? The fact that it's going down, and I'm a property owner. Most property owners are actually quite happy, because the rule in property is, a slow rise is good, a fast rise is a bubble. So yes, the economy is down, but it's not down and out. Our main business in Hong Kong is finance. That's the number one profession here. Second is trade. Third is tourism. So the finance will recover. There's no doubt about that. We just have too much financial acumen to suffer there. Trade will recover as well, because China and Hong Kong are trading more with Asian countries than with the West now. So if the West turns nasty and bans our products, puts tariffs on them, it doesn't matter, because you've got India, Thailand, you've got all the Asian countries to deal with.
I have a separate question. You mentioned all of these expats from other countries like India and Indonesia and Thailand and so forth. I honestly don't know the answer to this question. Is it also easy for them to enter into China's mainland through Hong Kong?
Yes, I mean, some get visa-free access, some need visas, but it's fairly efficient. You have to go to an office and have the photos and stuff, but it's not difficult to do that.
Because I know that China's mainland has really been pushing for tourism to increase. I don't even think it's economic. I think it's just because China wants the rest of the world to understand what China is really like by people coming here and seeing it for themselves. Because sometimes, let's be honest, the West does not present. There's two Chinas. There's the China that actually exists, which is this sunny reality I'm looking at through my window. And then there's the China that exists in Western media, which sounds awful, and I wouldn't want to live there.
That's right. Sort of dark dystopian tech nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah. In terms of, I want to talk about China and the rest of the world a little bit now. So you make a lot of memes about overcapacity, and it's kind of been an issue since Yellen's most recent visit. Is China flooding the rest of the world with excessive green technology, in your opinion?
This is a good example of wordplay, because what we call exports, they have now labeled overcapacity, and what used to be called protectionism, they now call de-risking. So they're just basically twisting the words. Like, I mean, just think of a product like, say, Jack Daniels, right? All the Jack Daniels in the world comes from one country, comes from USA, right? Now, we could just say, oh, the world is, America is inflicting its Jack Daniels overcapacity on planet Earth. How terrible. But that would be absurd, because we know what's really happening, which is they're making some for themselves and they're exporting others, because that is how international trade works. And it's exactly the same with electric cars. You make some for yourself and you make some to sell overseas. it's trade. It's trade. So it's absurd to think of it as overcapacity. It's playing with words. So naughty Mrs. Yellen.
Well, I mean, how do you feel about solar? Because there are a lot of other countries around the world, in Europe and in America, who are trying to produce solar panels and other related products that support that technology. And China has essentially been able to scale up the production of solar technology such that countries around the world, especially in the developing world, are able to install solar and kind of jump over a lot of fossil fuel burning technologies. The U.S. is a large exporter of oil. Is this fair to U.S. tech companies who are also trying to produce solar and sell oil?
Yeah, it's called international trade. It's called free enterprise. It's called capitalism. So basically, the US has declared war on capitalism. Someone makes a product cheaper and better, then that's capitalism working. If you then make a protectionist rule, tariffs, to stop that product succeeding, that's called protectionism. It's all basic 101 economics, but it's particularly ironic because it's green technology. Because oh, the world desperately needs green technology. Oh, someone's making it cheap enough for poor countries to afford. What should we do? Let's ban it. It just doesn't make sense. You can't ban cheap, good green technology. It's exactly what the world needs at this moment. So, yeah, facepalm moment.
Yeah, I mean, in China, I mean, I remember being here. I've only been here for about 12 years, but I remember the West always saying, "Oh, China, you need to do something about the way that you're consuming fossil fuels." And then China basically in 2023 installed as much solar, just solar. We're not even talking about onshore wind or offshore wind or these other technologies, just solar as the entire world installed in 2022 combined. And then the West was like, "But not like that." And it was like,
Right.
what do you want? They literally did exactly what the West was telling China that they ought to do. And then everyone is like, oh, no, no, no. We still want you to import our fuels, though. So it's just bizarre.
It is bizarre.
Yeah, I'm curious, as someone who walks around in Hong Kong, I don't know what the license plates there are like, but here in Beijing and the rest of China, a traditional ICE car, a traditional fossil fuel burning car, has a blue license plate. And then the new tech EVs and hybrids have green license plates. And so I walk around Beijing looking blue license plate, green license plate, blue. It's about 50-50. In Hong Kong, do you guys have a lot of EVs and hybrids also?
Yes. I mean, Hong Kong went Tesla mad. I think Hong Kong at one stage was Tesla's biggest market in the world. But now we're getting BYD cars and other cars. Yeah, we're kind of intrigued by the Chinese brands because, of course, they're better value than the Teslas. Teslas are very expensive here because there's a 100% tax on all cars here to discourage cars and to encourage people to use public transport. But the electric revolution is definitely happening here. The buses are going electric. We've even got a brand of hydrogen-powered bus here. So, but of course, you beat us to it. Shenzhen already had electric buses. Beijing already had electric buses. So we're playing catch up. Hong Kong is very hilly, so it's quite hard for electric buses. You need a lot of power. But it's happening. It's happening here. And of course, Hong Kong is a quite sort of face conscious. So if BYD or Tesla are the top brands now, everybody will want the latest BYD or Tesla because that looks good. You're doing a bit for the planet, and you can show off to your neighbors too. So yeah, Chinese cars are hot at the moment here.
I want to ask you a different question that's hard to have data for. I guess maybe a survey would do, but I'm going to ask you. 10 years ago, I remember seeing videos of Chinese mainlanders going to Hong Kong, and sometimes, occasionally, this wasn't. I don't want to misrepresent what was happening, but I would see videos of them being verbally abused, and I want to know, over the past decade, has the relationship between people living in Hong Kong and people living in China's mainland changed, and is it more amicable, or how would you describe it today, and what has led to that change?
That's a very good question. Yes, 10 years ago, it was terrible. It was terrible. And I accuse myself, we all made jokes about mainland visitors and teased them. And they were full of funny stories about, oh, look what the mainland visitor did next. It was obnoxious in the way that, British people are obnoxious about the Irish and the Americans are obnoxious about Polish and so on. So, people tend to have a group that they use as the butt of jokes, and Hong Kongers did make cruel jokes about mainland tourists until about 7 or 8 years ago, they became our biggest tourism, biggest contributor of tourist dollars. By 2019, 90% of tourist dollars and 90% of physical tourists too were from the mainland. So then everybody started to be nice to them because, you want their custom. Hong Kong's a business place, we're a trade place, we want custom from the mainland tourists. So then we were nice to them, except for certain groups. So there are certain groups called the indigenous, the localists, little clusters of rather bigoted people who would literally beat up mainlanders on the streets. And when the 2019 riot started, the localists and the indigenous, they call themselves, they were up front and center there because, of course, they hated mainlanders. And the theme of the Sheep and Wolves book we mentioned earlier, that came straight from those highly bigoted groups. So, so Lord Sumption and the Western journalists, they're defending this kind of awful bigotry. So thankfully, it was a small group, but again, this problem has been solved not because of anything good. It's just, well, look, they're our customers. We better be nice to them. So it was kind of, it was Hong Kong people had to be nice to the mainlanders because they were coming and spending money here, and we need that. Every country needs happy tourists. But thankfully now they are made welcome. And I mentioned the concerts earlier. The concerts were lovely because you saw mainlanders and Hong Kongs literally dancing together, and that's the future.
Speaking of the future, something we can't predict, obviously, but we can have hopes for and sort of try to craft. What positive steps do you think towards cooperation and mutual interest with the West and Greater China, what would you like to see? What do you think, what can be done to improve our relationship?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one, but I think it's got to be people to people, because we've tried for a long time to get the media to give a fairer picture of Hong Kong or mainland China, and that's a struggle. I think slowly we're getting there, but it's not easy. But people to people relationships are a plus. We see lots of exchange students coming and going. We see social media. Social media is great. I know you're a great voice on X.com, but X.com is really fun because what happens is that one of these very hostile people will put up a China is dystopia post, and there'll be literally 100 corrections saying, actually, this is not correct, putting it right. And it fills my heart when I see that, because it's somebody telling a lie about this community and the public correcting it. So and some of those people pushing those lies they're politically motivated, or they're journalists with agendas, and the public now can correct those errors. So one of my sayings is that the grasshoppers are big, but there are more of us ants. And I think that's a really important lesson. Yeah.
All right. That's from that movie. I can't remember. It's called Ants or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's from Bugs Life. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Well, what about in terms of Hong Kong and the rest of China? How would you say that the relationship is developing now, and how would you say what are your anticipations and hopes for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think the relationship is good now because, as I say, there's more travel to and fro. And the young generation is I mean, it's very interesting. If you interview a 30-year-old or a group of 30-year-olds, some of them will still have this very anti-mainland shtick going on. Some of them will have this brainwashed Western point of view. But the 20-year-olds and the teens, you say, what do you associate with China with, mainland China with? And they'll say Chinese K-pop. They'll mention a Mandarin app. They'll mention shopping. They'll mention Taobao. They'll mention Shenzhen shopping trips. So it's all positive things. I have a friend of mine who's a wealthy banker, and he's obsessed with Taobao because he said Taobao used to be so awful, everything would fall apart, terrible stuff, but now it's so good. The quality is good and the prices are still pretty cheap. Now this man has all the money in the world, but he's got all the money in the world because he's smart with money and he likes to bargain. So he spends his time on his Taobao app, which is fine with me. So so there's a growing good relationship, not through the media, through culture, normal culture, through music, shopping, movies, that sort of culture. So culture, our group here, we called it Friday Culture. That's the company name, because we could see that happening. We could see that the polarized political battles are not something you want all the time. Occasionally, you can indulge in one, but shared culture is a much stronger growth force, I think. And
in terms of social media, sometimes I see that as well. Like there are these polarized discussions going on, and sometimes I feel like entering into this would maybe only make it more polarized sometimes. Sometimes it's just better to go look for something positive and to enter into that and help grow that conversation as a supplement, as a replacement for this other conversation, and sort of marginalize the polarized conversation by having a more positive conversation about something else. Because
exactly.
It's a very challenging thing trying to help build these relationships in social media and in real life and so forth. But certainly, I had some university students come over to Beijing. I shouldn't say I had. They were invited by Beijing Foreign Studies University, and I was invited along to accompany these students from a university in America. And these 20 kids, young adults came here to Beijing, and I was able to interview them. And it was amazing to see how positive their experience was as it was ongoing. We went to the Forbidden City and walked around, and they talked about, wow, it's a beautiful day, it's blue skies. I didn't know that China had blue skies. So they were really elated that everything that they had heard or were concerned about before their first trip to China was not accurate. Everything positive that they were hoping China was going to be like turned out to be the case. And they were repeatedly, one interviewee after another, one student after another, saying basically the same thing. I was expecting, okay, at some point someone's going to be like, oh my gosh, something terrible happened, but it wasn't like that at all. All of them were excited to share their positive experiences with me. And I hope that we can convince more people not to necessarily live in Hong Kong, China, etc., but to come here and just see it for a week or two. Because there's so much, it's not just their own personal experience, but they're going to go home and they're going to talk to their mom, they're going to talk to their dad, their friends. Someone will have a conversation, at school that they'll overhear. Well, they'll start talking about China and they will jump in and be the voice of reason because they will have seen it for themselves. I think, your point about social media is really right on, because I ask every guest the same question: what can we do to help build intercultural understanding? And I get a lot of people-to-people exchange answers. I'll come here to see it for yourself answers, but I haven't gotten the social media one. Usually, I have no one in the history of my 100 interviews or so has anyone actually brought that up. And I think it's a really good point. And I also think that the dynamic there is really complicated because most of the people, I'd say 95+% of the people saying, negative things about China haven't been to China. And so, there's a small group of ringleaders who were here for a few years and years ago. In that group, sort of telling everyone what to sort of perceive. And I think if we could get those 95% of people to come over, it would just dissipate into nothing, because the reality of how China it really is nothing like some of the ways that it is portrayed in Western media. And it gets frustrating. I also, my Chinese is not that great. I am an HSK 4. level speaker. But I am also very critical of Western experts who don't speak Chinese because I'm sorry, you have a degree from Stanford or wherever, but if you haven't spent years and years and years and years in China or speak Chinese, then it doesn't really make sense for you to be commenting on Chinese culture to the degree to which you are, or especially being critical of. One thing I learned studying in cultural anthropology was, when you're in another culture that is foreign to you, you should try to be like that culture, try to accept the way that that culture is in and of itself, and try to understand things from within that culture's lens. And a lot of these people, they're trying to force their Western perceptions on how China behaves and how life in China should be, oftentimes with ignorance about what China is actually really like. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be an interview, but I just couldn't bottle it up too much more. But I do want to talk about the Greater Bay Area. I do want to talk about people-to-people exchanges down there in terms of technology. And that's an area where you comment a lot. How is Hong Kong? What are these cities that are integrated here? What are the cities that are involved, and what do different cities bring to the balance, bring to technology, bring to the economic relationship?
I mean, there's a story there in that way back, it would have been early 2000s. There was a student called Frank Wang in a university in Hong Kong, and he got a very, very small grant. I think it was 18,000 Hong Kong dollars, a couple of thousand US dollars anyway. And he used this grant to start his own tiny, tiny drone company, right? And now you know the rest of the story. He became the global king of drones, right? So his company is called DJI, and
yeah, I have his technology.
yeah, nearly all the drones in the world, like 70%, are his drones. Now he got the grant while he was in Hong Kong, but he then moved to Shenzhen because he found they were more willing to take a risk on him. So Shenzhen is now the world capital of drones. Huawei again is based in Shenzhen. Tencent is based in Shenzhen. So all these high-tech companies are just across the border, and so Hong Kong quite sort of jealous, so it's sort of like they're doing technology really well there. And not only that, but I think one can legitimately say that part of the world, southern China around Shenzhen, is the tech capital of Asia by far. It's got the biggest tech companies, those big three I mentioned, but others as well. So you've got the tech capital of Asia growing out of a place that was just literally a farming village 40 years ago. So we're seeing that technological development, and we're learning from it. So Hong Kong at the moment is building a city on the border between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, and that's going to be a very techy city. And it's, Hong Kong does big infrastructure projects like mainland China, so that the scale planned for that city is huge. It's like say Birmingham in UK, one of the big cities. I think Birmingham's the second biggest city in the UK. It's of that sort of scale, huge land area and large envisaged population. So we're getting in on that tech good luck story that we've seen in southern China. Southern Chinese cities, they're doing quite well now. A lot of them have these little stations where if you go from Hong Kong and you're either a Westerner with Western credit cards or a Hong Konger with Hong Kong credit cards, they'll help you. They'll give you a tourist help who will help you get onto the Chinese phone systems. Because in China, you need your phone, right, to buy stuff. And so they'll sit there and they'll walk you through it. So you can become like a Chinese citizen. In the Hong Kong mass transit system, they're combining options so that you can use it here in Hong Kong and you can use it in mainland China. So bit by bit, the two areas are coming together. So that's got to be a good thing. It's not political. It's just hey, my card works there as well. I'm going to go shopping there. Simple and easy.
I haven't used a card in so long. It's weird to even hear about it. I have cards in a wallet, like tucked away in a dusty box somewhere that I link to my bank, but I just use WeChat. I'm assuming everywhere in Hong Kong takes WeChat Pay, right?
Yeah. So Hong Kong's rapidly adopting WeChat and Alipay. Those two systems, it's rapidly adopting it. And occasionally now you get places which say only Alipay, or something like that. So I think, wow, that really is becoming like mainland China.
Well, here in China, we have farmers that live close to big cities. They oftentimes drive their produce into the edges of cities, Sixth Ring, Fifth Ring in Beijing and other places, and you can go out and buy like fresh tomatoes from their farm on a daily basis from the farmer. And it used to be that they only took cash, and now you can't use cash. You have to scan the QR code and pay them with WeChat, otherwise you're not going home with tomatoes that day. So like it's really bizarre to me, these people who they live on like a farm outside of the city, they don't even use cash. It's really progressed to a point where it's tipped the other way entirely. So I wanted to ask you a different question. I didn't, really tell you I was going to ask you, but I'm really curious, and obviously you would be the person to know. You have these areas in Hong Kong called the New Territories, right? And those are, I actually stayed in a 5-star hotel up there one time. It was really nice and affordable. You talk about the cost of real estate in Hong Kong, and a lot of us have seen these pictures on Douyin and Baidu and all these really tiny apartments that cost, unbelievable amounts of money that people show each other at dinners. Can you believe how expensive it is in Hong Kong? But are these new territories providing, relief for people who don't mind taking the subway into the main part of the city? And what opportunities for development are there?
Yes, there are new towns in the rural areas around the urban areas, and yeah, property is significantly less expensive there. Same on the islands. I mean, Hong Kong has 230 plus islands, and some of them have properties on them. So again, it's cheaper because there's the inconvenience of travel. But when I say inconvenience of travel, it's absurd because it's a tiny place, so it's a 40-minute ferry journey or a 25-minute train journey. So these long distances are actually not long distances at all. So yeah, you can find inexpensive, well, not inexpensive, but comparatively affordable places if you're willing to travel a little bit. And of course, some people travel all the way from mainland China. They're commuting from across the border. I know in a couple of surveys of the area, Zhuhai has been named as one of the nice places to live. Waterfront and mountains and good quality properties at reasonable prices. So I know some Hong Kongers are moving from there. Also, mainland China has good golf courses, so that attracts a lot of Hong Kong people. They go over there and play golf.
I guess I have another question related to that, based on what you just said. So you're saying that there are people who live their lives in Hong Kong and work there, but they use Zhuhai as a suburbia, sort of.
Yes, I mean, some people even, they'll get a house on the mainland side of the border and send their kids to school here. So the kids literally cross the an international border every day to go to school. So, and that's been going for a very long time. One of the things the wolf and sheep people did was to campaign to stop the children coming through, which is just such an awful thing to do, isn't it? And yet the Western media portrays these campaigners as heroes. They're just awful, awful people. Why would you stop children coming to school here? Terrible. But yeah, but that's come back now. You can live in, there's hundreds of thousands of old people who live in old Hong Kongers who live on the mainland side of the border. Wow. Probably, I say hundreds of thousands, but there's no official counting of them. It's probably a million. It's probably a million. So
that is very hopeful for me, because that level of integration where cities around Hong Kong are being used as basically a refuge from the cost of living. People move there. It's the same thing happening in cities like Shanghai as well. I know a lot of people who live in cities like Suzhou, for example, and they, the high-speed rail between Shanghai and Suzhou is like 25 minutes. So they just live in Suzhou, where the cost of living is considerably lower. Then they spend most of their working life, and their nightlife in Shanghai just by taking the train back and forth every day, which is not that dissimilar from taking a subway. It's just a much, much faster subway with a very specific point of entry and exit. So it's very interesting that that's also happening in Hong Kong, and also kind of like very positive because that level of people-to-people exchange is, considerably, has the possibility of creating much better outcomes for, social
Yeah.
integration. That's
And
truly remarkable.
another good example, which people are shocked at, is Taiwan. I remember a few years ago, I tried to calculate how many Taiwanese were living in Chinese mainland. And at that time, maybe 5 years ago, there were officially 400,000. But when you actually talk to demographers, they said, oh, it's more than double that. So then again, we're talking about 1 million Taiwan people from Taiwan Island province based in the mainland. And, I said that to Western reporters, and they were just amazed. They couldn't believe it because they think of them as two societies, at war almost, and it's nothing like that. So it's much more integrated than people realize.
That's amazing. I knew that there were a great deal of students studying on both sides, and there were a lot of people who owned factories on either sides and did business on either side, but actually having residents on both sides, it's just remarkable how little us, I have to say us Western journalists know about what's really happening in China. And I'm here all the time. I've been here for more than a decade. I actively try to learn more about China every day, and yet interviewing people like you frequently just makes me realize how little I actually know. It's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more I learn, the more I realize there's so much more that I don't know. So it's really amazing to have people like you on and to teach myself and our listeners who love you, by the way. We've had you on before. I wanted to ask you because you're quite a prolific writer. You've written not only novels but children's books as well. It was interesting. Earlier you're analyzing this book about the sheep because it's a children's book. You also write children's book about quantum mechanics, of all things. I wanted to ask you, as a writer, what books are on the horizon? What can your readership look forward to reading coming up in the next year or two?
Yeah. Again, I think culture is a good way to get East and West together. So I've been writing science books for kids because science books for kids they work well for Asia because Asians tend to be nerdy. The schools here tend to do a lot of STEM, science and technology, engineering, that sort of subject. So they do well here. And Western countries are trying to be more scientific as well. I can use one of the problems with science books is that they tend to use Western examples. So I can do science books using Asian examples or just, more international examples. So I've done quite a few sort of books. I did a series called Young Scientists, which was looking at scientists when they were young and their early discoveries. And I made a huge effort to put Asian scientists and Western scientists in there together. And female scientists, got to be politically correct these days, right? So so children's books are a good way to bridge that gap because ultimately I actually hate politics. So you've got to do some politics sometimes, but I hate politics. I'd much rather just do culture. So if I could just write children's books, I'd be happy doing that all the time. Yeah. So I've got one coming out on. Yeah. I did quantum physics a couple of years ago. I've got one coming out on engineering, I think, next. A history of engineering for kids. Hopefully culture, happy international joint culture is the way ahead.
Well, you send me the links to your books and I'll be happy to post them on my social media as well. Thank you so much for your time, Nury Vittachi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason.
Hello.